Welcome back to Establish the Edge. And remember, just in case you didn't see last week's episode in your feed, that's because we got promoted to the big leagues. Our 2-round rookie draft is on the Establish the Run podcast feed with our good friends Theo Grimminger and Fantasy Points, and of course, Pat Carrain at Legendary Upside. But today, another very special guest to walk us through his rookie running back tiers. None other than Fantasy Life's, and of course the owner of the supermodel over at Fantasy Life, Dwain McFarland. Dwain, my Texas brethren, how are you doing?
Yeah, good. Like Daigle, you got to get back to Texas. We got to do the rib tacos again. Daigle and I, we both come. Our towns are about an hour apart, a little over an hour, like where we grew up. So yeah, we have our Texas ties. But yeah, man, super excited to be on, super excited to talk about running backs. Not the greatest class ever, but we have teams that need running backs, Daigle, and some of these guys, although they might have gone in round 4 or 5 last year, we're going to have some of them going round or 2, 3 this year. So they're going to get opportunities. So yeah, excited to break them all down.
It's been a couple of years, by the way. Life's got in the way, but I can confirm June, middle of June, 2 weeks.
Do it.
Ribs tacos multiple times. Until then, though, we will have rookie drafts around then, and it's very clear that Jeremiyah Love is the key, the skeleton key of this year's rookie draft, the clear 101. But I'm still curious to get your thoughts on his profile and just what you think about Jeremiyah Love coming out this year.
Yeah, I mean, Jeremiyah Love, so like he grades out in the same range in the rookie supermodel. And Daigle, you said owner of a supermodel. Like, I don't know if we can say that. My wife, she's beautiful, so I'll go with it. But she would definitely say that I don't own her. So look, with Jeremiyah Love, like he's very highly touted. Obviously, he was a highly lauded prospect, coming out of high school. Didn't get going really early in his career. You got there, you had Audric Estime, who ended up going in the NFL draft. You come in, Jadarian Price, also, who we'll talk about in just a little bit. So like when you look at his production rating, so the way the rookie supermodel works is really based on 4 key criteria. Number 1, your draft capital value. Okay. So we don't just use draft pick. We're assigning a value to draft picks, right? Because once you get to late round 2, early picks, guys, like it's a logarithmic curve, not to get too nerdy, but it goes down like this, and then it flattens off as I just run into my microphone there. Like this is where it flattens, right here at my microphone. But once you get to like rounds 4, 5, and 6, it doesn't make as big of a difference in the model, right? It leans more into the other components, such as their production rating, which is looking at their yards per team pass attempt and their receiving yards per team pass attempt. Those are the 2 primary components that drive the production rating in the model. It's obviously adjusted for age, the strength of schedule they played, their teammates that they were with, the program quality. There's a lot of different things that's the key with the models. This, Daigle, is like, how do you normalize the data so you can get the best apples to apples comparison, right? Versus, really getting apples to oranges by comparing 2 players that one played on a run heavy team and they were the only game in town. The other played on a pass heavy team and there were 2 5-star recruits on the team.
It's also become a lot more complicated in the post-combine NIL era, where we're now talking about players potentially going on for 6 years in college, not to mention some very shortened seasons to protect themselves. So yeah, the model inputs have to be back tested for quite a few years.
Yeah. And I mean, it's interesting. Like I talk about this in the rookie supermodel. You guys can find it for free over at fantasylife.com. We've got it on the homepage. You can see running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends. But it's something that I call out is like continuing to monitor this stuff, right? As these players get paid. Now, most college athletes aren't getting paid anything, but the top guys that we care about that can come out into the NFL, they get pretty lucrative offers, guys, to hang around. So it'll be interesting to see how that impacts it. Obviously, the COVID season is still in a lot of this data. That extended some players' careers to year 5 or year 4 even. So yeah, but when we talk about Jeremiyah Love, like the biggest thing, like, look, the scouts love him. I said draft capital rating, production rating, which gets normalized. Then there's a film rating, and there's a very small percentage for running backs, guys, that go to athleticism. And the only input in the model is speed score. Like after testing everything, it's really the only one that matters, and it doesn't get a huge weight. If you guys don't know what speed score is, it's essentially adjusting their 40 time for weight. Okay. Bill Barnwell invented it. I won't get into all the math of it, but essentially the idea being is the guy that weighs 170 pounds and runs a 4.38 is not the same as a guy that weighs 220 pounds, right, and runs a 4.38 40. So after putting all those inputs in, like Jeremiyah Love grades out really good, but his draft capital, I will say, Daigle, is really carrying him because he's looking to be a potential top 7 pick right now in the NFL draft. And part of that is because we don't have a lot of other blue chip prospects at the other positions in this draft. We've got some depth at defensive line, the edge rushers. We've got some depth at safety. There's some nice players, but it's not like we have 3 quarterbacks going in the top 10. It's not like we have a ton of elite offensive linemen going in the top 10. So I think some of these teams that are considering Love at the top, they're like, look, there's not that many blue chip prospects, but the positive is they consider Love a blue chip player, right? They really do. And so his production rating, though, is a little lower than what you typically see for a top 10 pick in the NFL if he does, in fact, go in that range. Like Christian McCaffrey, his production rating was a 100 in the model. If you look at Jeremiah Love's, it's a 75. Ashton Jeanty was a 95. Jahmyr Gibbs was an 89. Bijan Robinson was an 83. Saquon Barkley was an 88. So all of those guys that went in the top 10, they had a higher production rating than what we have here with Jeremiah Love. Now, people will look at that, and like we said, he did play with Estime, in his first 2 years. And so Estime went on to be in the NFL. Then you've got Jadarian Price there as well. So, Jadarian Price, like he could sneak into the end of round 1. I don't think he should be an end of round 1 NFL draft pick. Like he's a day 2 guy, but because we have a shallow class, he could move up. But still, you did have other good players, right, playing there, with him. So the thing I'll say with Love, though, is like when you dig into his underlying data, like as far as his receiving profile, even though his best, career receiving yards per team pass attempt wasn't great, like the yards per route run were above average, all those things that we look for. So, and the scouts point to that too, right? If you look at the film rating, like they point to like, this is a guy with untapped upside in the receiving game. And I think when you watch him, like, not that we're like, film grinders or anything, like it's pretty evident that this is a guy, if you work him, get him in space, he can also do some stuff beyond the line of scrimmage. I don't think he's limited to being just a check down player. But yeah, I mean, he grades out ultimately in the rookie supermodel. He gets an 89. So that's the same grade as Bijan Robinson and the same grade as Jahmyr Gibbs. So, I mean, we're talking about a guy that we think comes in, is going to be an every down running back at the NFL level. And he has that electric playmaking ability. And you know how it goes. When you put those two things together, Daigle, typically really good things happen. And man, if you go in the top 10 in most drafts, I will say this, I think Jeremiah Love would probably slot in more at like pick 12 to 15 based on like all the factors. But it doesn't really matter. If a team spends a top 15 pick on you, like you're going to get your chance. Basically, you have to be bad. That's the only way you can fail. And occasionally that does happen. We saw it with Trent Richardson back in the day, even though in year 1 he was fine, for fantasy. But most of these guys, like they have long productive careers. So I'm in agreement with you. Like the model really does love him. Like if you look at the guys that have gone in his range, as far as if you look at the rookie supermodel, in their first 3 years, that's all I look at. So in their first 3 years in the NFL, like his comps, 75% of them posted a top 6 running back finish. 100% of them reached top 12 status by year 3. So he's in really good company. His closest comp in the model is Bijan Robinson. The mid tier would be Travis Etienne, and the low end of the tier of the range of outcomes is DeAndre Swift.
I mentioned this on a past episode with JJ Zacharyson, but the draft capital, it matters so much. Even after Ashton Jeanty's poor year, still in the last decade, 36% of a running back's fantasy points in their rookie year is based on draft capital. And so if we're expecting Love to be a top 5 pick, similar to Jeanty, I didn't expect him to remake or force the Raiders to then become a contender just by drafting him. Like, I don't think the Titans are suddenly contenders if they draft Jeremiah Love that early with a top 5 pick, but nonetheless, we still think he's a blue chip player, and that's going to dictate then how we treat him in fantasy, even in season long right now in best ball at the back end of the first round around Ashton Jeanty, Saquon Barkley, and Devon Achane. Here's where it gets interesting though, Dwayne, because let's step back for a second, and I want to get your thoughts on outside of a super flex rookie draft, because that's when Mendoza slides in. And so the first 5 picks, when we add in Love, Carnell Tate, Jordan Tyson, and Mekhi Lemon, in whatever order, the first 5 picks in the super flex draft are solidified this year. But then based on who you ask, the answer varies. And so first off, let's get off the topic of running backs. And I'm curious, who is your 106, 107? What's that next tier for you in a rookie draft?
Well, the draft will determine, some of this. Yeah, but I think that Casey Concepcion, assuming that he does still go at the end of round 1, he had the knee scope, so we'll see what ultimately happens with him. but the production profile, he had one bad year, but he started off really strong. And for receivers, like the early production is even more important, right, than what we see with the running backs. And he did it right out of the gate in year one. Year two, kind of got, year 2 and 3, he got a little bit mired, like with some scheme, issues, but like in his final year at Texas A&M, like worked more vertically, played outside, really showed that he could really do everything versus being more of like a gadget player early in his career. So Concepcion, would be my pick. I think Omar Cooper Jr. is interesting, but the rookie supermodel, and it really grades him as being like an early day 2 to like, so basically he would be fine like as an early round 2 pick, but really grades out more as a mid round 2 pick. With Concepcion, he grades out as someone that typically would go at the end of round 1. Now, you guys know what happens with these players that go at the end of round 1. Like the hit rates are all over the place. For these receivers, like there are a lot of them that end up not being good. But Casey Concepcion would really be my pick for it. I know there are people that talk about Denzel Boston. I will say this: Denzel Boston doesn't grade out good in the rookie supermodel. The rookie supermodel, it does account like for your teammate competition, but I mean, it may not account for it enough, Daigle, because like it was such an extreme situation when you're playing with Denzel Boston. You're playing with Jalen Polk, who obviously got drafted way too high, and then also like who's the name I'm forgetting? Tampa Bay's wide receiver 3 right now.
Jalen McMillan.
Yeah. Jalen McMillan. Yeah. So like you and like on that team, you also had Jeremy Bernard, when he got there, who's going to be a day 2 pick in this NFL draft, most likely. So extremely loaded room. And as soon as those guys all left, he did immediately turn into a player. So there's a chance the rookie supermodel is too low on him. But Casey Concepcion, he would be my answer as the number 6 right now, pre-draft.
I think I'm ready to lock in Concepcion at the 106 too, just because that's the same answer that JJ had. And he quoted it as it's not close. Like it's the 106 is Concepcion. Again, we will get a little more relief in knowing where he gets picked when your rookie drafts are after the actual NFL draft. Moving back to running backs though, again, the RB2 differs based on who you ask, and the second and third tier differs. Some may even make the argument that the second and fourth tier are the same players. So I want to kick it to you, first of all. Who is your RB2 in this class?
Yeah, so first, like, I'll just say, like, with the class, like, a little bit of context for you guys. So in the rookie supermodel, essentially, like, we really want, like, it's not exact thresholds, but, like, if we're using one, you want a guy that grades out as a 70 plus, right? If you're in that 80 to 89 band, we have really good hit rates. Obviously, if you're in the 90 to 100 band, everything's on a scale of 50 to 100 in the rookie supermodel. Like, if you're in the 90 band, like, you're, like, basically a lock. You're going to be a hit. If you're in the 80 to 89 band, like, you're a near lock to be a hit. Once we get into the third band, though, we start really getting like this wider range of outcomes on these players. And that's where we have 3 guys that are in that range this year. So Jeremiyah Love fits in that 80 to 89 bucket, almost in the 90. He'll move into the 90 bucket. Like if he goes pick 4 to the Titans, he'll move to a 91 in the rookie supermodel. So really, like the way I look at it, there are a tier of guys here. And I don't necessarily think that it has to be a situation where you're like, oh my God, this is my one I'm making, an absolute stand on. So I have Jonah Coleman in this tier. I also have Nicholas Singleton in the tier, and then I have Emmett Johnson. And if you guys go look at the rookie supermodel ratings, you're gonna be like, oh, well, that's not the exact order. Well, the reason why is this tier, I would say these are the players that have every down potential. And that's really what we care about, Daigle. Yep. Like, is it someone that can play across all the downs? We can look at all the different metrics and everything else, but you really want a well-rounded player that when opportunity knocks and they get their break, they could fully take over a backfield, right? And maybe that's only for 8 weeks of a fantasy season and you never see them again. But for that 8 weeks, they may help you win a championship because they can play on passing downs. They can handle the work inside the 5-yard line, all those sort of things. Like in a tier below that, like I've got the early down options. So you've got Jadarian Price, you've got Mike Washington Jr., and you've got Katron Allen. But right now, based on what we know about those players coming out of college, like they don't have very good receiving profiles. So I would say tier 2 for me, I would start with Jonah Coleman. And whenever you look at Coleman, like he's a well-rounded player. And he's another guy where the rookie supermodel, like it doesn't count against players games they didn't play. So we're only dividing their stats by the games they actually played. If they miss games with injuries, that gets removed from the model. But he suffered a PCL injury in this final season, and he was not the same player after he came back. But he was really on pace to have his biggest season ever. In fact, like his rookie supermodel rating would move 2 points if I were to just exclude the final games of the season where he was playing through that PCL injury, and his production rating would move up 6 points in the rookie supermodel. So I think he's just one of these guys. And the other thing, this doesn't necessarily go into the model, but you know how this goes, Daigle. Like as you do this longer and longer, even though we know like fumble rate itself like does not correlate to future production in the NFL. Pass blocking in college doesn't, equate to future production in the NFL. But whenever you're doing tiebreakers on this stuff, like it just makes sense that like when you have a player like Jonah Coleman, he's the most well-rounded. Like he's a good pass blocker. He doesn't drop the ball. He doesn't fumble the ball. So my kind of thesis on him is he grades out well enough in the model, but at the same time, like you could just see him being the kind of player that comes in and becomes a coach's pet right away, right? And becomes the running back 2 on a team with a weak depth chart. And by week 6 or 7 of his rookie season, they're like, let's just give Jonah Coleman a spin. Let's just roll with it. So, and he grades out well in the model despite having lower draft capital, right, than Jadarian Price expected draft capital at this point, guys. And he actually has lower expected draft capital. He's right he's about a round later right now than Mike Washington Jr. So it's significant that the model is actually saying that no, Jonah Coleman is probably a better player than those 2 guys for the NFL. The next guy's really similar. Like it's Emmett Johnson. And I know that's someone that JJ is pretty high on as well. But like this is another guy that can play across all 3 downs. I do think that Jonah Coleman has more upside as far as like being a player that can play inside the 5-yard line at the next level. I mean, he's 5'8", but he's 220. He's kind of like that MJD like type of build. He's just built, to be able to handle a heavier workload. Not to say that Emmett Johnson can't. I do think that Emmett Johnson, like in a vacuum, like is a better receiver, but they're actually closer than I think what most people think. So when you look at Jonah Coleman, kind of the same thing. When you look at what his best receiving yards per team pass attempt season would have been, if we were to exclude those games after the PCL injury, like he would come in right under where Emmett Johnson is. They would be very close. So I have a slight lean, but I don't. Honestly, if someone wanted to say it's Emmett Johnson, or if someone wanted to say it's Jonah Coleman, like I'm not going to argue. Like I think those guys are really in a tier together. What are your thoughts?
My RB2 and RB3 is Jonah Coleman and Emmett Johnson. I think we are aligned on that. It's kind of like how right now, it's early. Not many people are doing best ball drafts, I understand. But there is a tier break, in my opinion, when you get to Breece Hall. And I have to jam him in like the second tier running backs, if only because he does have that elite receiving profile. It was a career low target share with the Jets last year, but we can also blame that on the quarterback and just the offensive play caller. They've changed both of those things for better or worse this year. Yeah. And the fact is, we chase, like you said, that archetype of player. And Jonah Coleman, to give career context to what you're saying, which the model at Fantasy Life does, but still, I also tend to weigh early breakout, so how quickly you did something, you made a big impact in college, and your performance in like the biggest games of your career, basically like Power 4 games. But to give context to his entire career, 6.8 yards per carry for Jonah Coleman at only 20 years old when he was at Arizona, and then also 90 targets over the last 3 seasons. That's just something I'm going to blindly take a chance on, especially when looking at the context of the rest of this class. Also for Emmett Johnson, if he was in the class last year, would I even be talking about him?
I know.
Probably not. He's probably a day 3 guy. May even be a day 3 guy this year. Who knows? But at least
to give people context, like Bajal Tutin, for example, would be the number 2 running back in this class this year. Like last year was, so I just said there were 4 guys, right, that graded over a 70 in the rookie supermodel this year. Last year we had 10. So, I mean, it's a big difference, right, in the depth of this of the class. So, yeah, proceed. I just, wanted to jump in with that tidbit.
But, at least Emmett, despite bombing his testing at the combine, we've seen, I think that matters less to NFL scouts than we believe, just because we also saw what Cam Skattebo did, and similar to Skattebo, Emmett Johnson is a very good player on tape. Like he just does a lot of things that NFL teams will covet, not to mention consistent slot usage throughout his career, which gets me excited too. So
I will say, interestingly, I did test that. Actually, NFL teams care more about the NFL Combine than what it matters for their future production in the NFL. Like,
okay, so then maybe Skattebo is just like the rare unicorn. Which, let's be honest, when we listen to him do interviews and see him play, he's a unicorn in itself, anyways.
Well, yeah, and he was on another level as far as his production rating
Yeah.
than these guys. Scadaboo was, and so he was a really, really good receiver in college out of the backfield, and is the archetype of player with the size to really take all the carries inside the 5 yard line. So similar, I do agree, similar archetype because we're talking about guys that can play across all downs. But at the same time, like Scadaboo, just he off his production rating was higher than either of these two guys. But I do think they're all in the same spectrum, right? Like the thesis behind all of them is the same, which is, man, if things worked out, right landing spot, weak depth chart, or they become the running back 2, the starter gets hurt, like can the player actually get out there and play all of the downs? And if you guys have played fantasy long enough, at running back, that's all it takes. You can have a top 12 running back on your hand the rest of the season whenever that injury strikes, or if they land. If one of these guys land in Seattle where we know we don't have Zach Charbonnet the first 8 weeks, like we're immediately going to project them as the starter until Zach Charbonnet returns. Like these are the guys that are going to get that kind of treatment. Once you start getting into some of the other names, like we don't know for sure if they would take over a full-time role. They might get the early down work, right, on a team like Seattle early in the year. But are they going to get that pass game work? And I think that's a big question. Like Emmett Johnson, like what's funny is like one of his closest comps on the high end range for the model is Zach Charbonnet. Ramondre Stevenson falls in his comp group. Ray Davis is in the comp group. And there is overlap between these two guys. Jonah Coleman also has Ramondre Stevenson in his comp group, but he has Kyron Williams and Royce Freeman as well. So Royce Freeman, I get it, guys, didn't work out in the NFL, but like he is a player like that. He stuck around in the NFL. He's still hanging around on rosters. Like Royce Freeman's never done anything, but teams know, man, if we get in a pinch, like this is a guy that he can do a little bit of everything. So I like those comps and the way that the model handled them.
I know they're not necessarily baked into the model, but for what it's worth, NFL teams also seeing Jonah Coleman, a former Doak Walker winner, as the best running back in the country and Heisman finalist as well. Does that round out your second tier of running backs for this class?
There's one other guy in the tier, and I think he's much more boom bust than the two players that we just talked about, but it's Nicholas Singleton. So Nicholas Singleton has shown an ability to play on passing downs very well. Now, he's not for as big and fast as he is. So here's the thing, guys. If Nicholas Singleton had not injured his foot and had been able to participate at the NFL Combine, he very likely would be the running back 2 in the class. You guys saw how far Mike Washington Jr. moved up just by being big and running fast. Essentially, he went from being a late day 3 pick to now potentially being a late round 2 pick in this class. Nicholas Singleton is Mike Washington Jr. with a receiving skill set, right? I mean, they're both big, fast. Like this is the kind of player that has like Kyle Shanahan written all over it. Like he loves this archetype. Mike Washington Jr., I wrote that up as well. I was like, this guy's going to get drafted. The 49ers
day 2. 49ers day 2.
Yeah, they have, I think, 4 fourth rounders based on comp picks and stuff. So the 49ers are probably taking one of these guys. It'll be Nicholas Singleton or Mike Washington Jr. But I like Nick Singleton better because he has shown that he has an ability to operate out of the backfield as a pass catcher. Now, again, more boom bust here because he doesn't have the natural feel, and this comes through in the production rating, guys, as far as like what they do carrying the ball as a rusher. Like he doesn't grade out as well as a pure runner as the other two guys we talked about with Emmett Johnson and Jonah Coleman, but he does have that big playability. And if the light ever switches on, which we don't know if it will. Like, I mean, this guy was the number 1 running back recruit, in his class. He was a 5-star prospect. So we know he's got the athleticism. He's got the size. He can catch the ball. So if it did click on and he lands in the right scheme, like Nick Singleton's the one other. He gets a 70 rating in the rookie supermodel, so slightly below Jonah Coleman, right in the same range with Emmett Johnson, but a little bit more boom bust, like to his profile, in my opinion, even though the model puts him in that same range. But I think he belongs in that tier. What are your thoughts on him?
I agree with you. I don't know if I have him in the same tier yet, but I completely understand. A guy who, if you look at yards per route run, over 1.5 the last 3 years. So it's not just being used consistently as a receiver. He was consistently efficient as a receiver too, despite just last year playing behind Katron Allen, who oddly was their early down bruiser, despite being the same size. And they do kind of play differently because Singleton is, like you said, it would have tested as a significant athlete Our friend Matt Kelly at Player Profiler even has his comp as Kareem Hunt. And we all remember Kareem Hunt's rookie seasons with Kansas City, just shot out of a cannon as a player who could play on all three downs. So I still like Nicholas Singleton for sure. I think that's where a tier break comes for me, though, then getting with Mike Washington next for me. What about you next?
Yeah, so I would put Singleton above Washington just purely because like the potential for the 3-down ability. But yes, the next tier has Mike Washington Jr. in it. I do have Jadarian Price ahead of him. So like this tier, essentially these guys all grade out similar to the guys we just talked about. But the tier we talked about before has that passing down potential, or at least they've shown it in college. This group has not, right? Yeah. And so I have Jadarian Price at the top. He has a rookie supermodel rating of 71, but then I have Mike Washington Jr. just below that at a 69. And so Price, he's one of these tricky guys because, you played with Jeremiyah Love, so it's these are super hard players to get a read on, but like his closest comps in the model. And one of the things I did, so guys, the way I work the comps is I start with the rookie supermodel score. Then I would dwindle it down based on their production rating. And then I look at the film rating. And then once I have that group, if I can look at someone that kind of had to play in a similar situation, maybe as far as the way they had to share the backfield, or maybe they're stylistically similar players, then those become like the tiebreakers for how you like tighten down like your comp group. But his comp group, Miles Sanders, who obviously under-delivered overall versus what people wanted in fantasy, but he gave us productive fantasy seasons. He played with Saquon Barkley. Damian Harris is another one, right? A guy that gave us a few usable fantasy seasons, never became a star, but had to share a workload like in college with like amazing backs, right? That came out of Alabama. And then Brian Robinson Jr., another guy out of Alabama. So it's interesting, with Price, like, and if you read like the scouting reports on him, pretty much consensus, right, is like just a player that, like, to put it in a nutshell, like he knows how to play running back. Like he's a guy that has the feel for the game. He's a guy that, he ran a 4.49, 40, which is still fine. That's like the 61st percentile. Like speed score, though, he's not huge, right? So he's not just going to like blow you away with his athleticism. But when you just look at his ability to like read multiple types of, schemes in front of him, whether it's, more of a power blocking scheme or whether you want to run a zone scheme. Like he's just a guy that has a natural feel for the game. The limitation is obviously his receiving yards per team pass attempt were terrible at Notre Dame. So with him, like I would be fine though if someone's like, no, they're so close, man. Supermodel rating of 71 for Jadarian Price, a 69 right now for Mike Washington Jr. So just so you guys to frame this, like to give it context, guys that have gone on to have top 6 finishes that finish in this range of the rookie supermodel, 4%. Like the odds are very low that like you're getting a superstar fantasy football player. The more realistic way to look at it is guys that have given you a top 36 or a top 24 finish in their first 3 years. So we'll go with top 24, 27% for Jadarian Price. And at Mike Washington Jr., it's 22%. Like we're not talking about like huge differences here, right? And the model goes back to 2017 for running backs. So we're still relatively young, like from a perspective of the model and how far it goes back. So man, I wouldn't, if you want Mike Washington Jr., it's not one of these things where I would be like pounding the table and be like, no, it can't be Mike Washington Jr. It has to be Jadarian Price. But I think they're in the same tier.
We'll obviously know more after the draft, but if the 49ers do end up with Mike Washington Jr., it's just odd because I feel like they drafted him in Isaac Garindo just a couple years ago. And then really
before that, Israel Abanikanda. It's the same thing. Those are the two top comps for him in the model.
He's just a yak guy. And I think his offense masks the deficiencies that Washington brings with him. Like NFL teams are going to see one of the heaviest, I believe, running back in this class at 223, but then also tested as the fastest, as 100 percentile athlete. NFL teams are just going to see that and imagine Derrick Henry, despite being, a little bit lighter.
And we're seeing that again. Yeah. He was being mocked as a round 6 pick before the combine. Mm-hmm. Now he's a potential late round 2 guy.
And I think that's why, we're getting a little more excited about him. But for Jadarian Price, there is a difference in how he's viewed in, right now at least, pre-draft fantasy spheres as opposed to the NFL. Because like you said, what everyone's saying about him is that he just knows how to play the game. But that obviously it's hard to get shoved into a model, which is why guys like myself, you, other smart individuals are lower on him. Just because, like, I see when we talk about the archetype we want in tier 2 of rookie running backs, I see 15 career catches, and I'm like, man, there's no way Jadarian Price is getting shoved in at the end of the first round when we think he's strictly like a between the tackles early down guy. That just doesn't make sense.
Yeah. Yeah. And I will say with players that come from loaded backfields like what you had at Notre Dame, and also, like, you know, if you have good pass catchers around you on the outside, on the perimeter, tight ends, things like that, we do occasionally see some of these guys turn into quality receivers at the NFL. Kenneth Walker is a great example. There's a lot of people still hanging on to their priors that Kenneth Walker is not a good receiver out of the backfield. No, he's not Christian McCaffrey. He's not Alvin Kamara. He's not going to be running a Texas route against a linebacker. He's not going to be breaking guys down at the second level, but everything around the line of scrimmage, Kenneth Walker can do, like yards per route run of over 1.3 each of his last 3 seasons. That ranks, you know, that puts you in top 6 territory for running backs as far as looking at how guys have performed historically in fantasy. So we do get some players that get in these sort of scenarios where it's kind of like, you know, you played on a great team and they just didn't need to throw you the ball out of the backfield. He is an explosive player. Like 18% of his carries went for 10 plus yards. That's actually higher than Jeremiyah Love, who's sitting at 17%. So I'm with you. The model's docking him for that big time. I will just throw the caveat out there, like, you know, doing this long enough, we do occasionally see these players, depending on where they played and what in the skill positions around them. You have to remember at the NFL level, like, so the way I look at him would be this. If he landed on a team that only had one really good receiver, I think he could still get like a 12% target share just as a check down guy. You land down, you know, because most running backs can do that, guys. We you know, if you think about the check down stuff, like really 75% of the backs in the league can catch a check down. There are some exceptions to the rule of guys that still can't do this. But if you land on a team where you've got 2 good receivers and a solid tight end, that's where you really get in trouble.
I feel like that is especially telling for Mike Washington Jr. I feel like he has an untapped ceiling if landing in the right role as a receiving back, just because of that Arkansas offense he was on was run heavy and just drowning with RPOs. Like, we really, even in having 28 catches last year, we really didn't even get to see him excel in that kind of position just because that wasn't the offense at all.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, his best receiving yard per team pass attempt was 0.59. That's in the 29th percentile.
I mean, yeah.
So, I mean, it's
you don't even got to tell me the percentile. I hear the number. I'm like, that's not good. It's terrible.
Well, some people don't know, so I try to give it. It's terrible. Like, the big thing with him is, like, you know, he was recruited to Buffalo. He redshirted. Okay. Like, not a very big program. So the late start is what really killed Mike Washington, like in his production rating in the supermodel. It's a 63. It's really low for someone that would go in round 2 of the NFL draft. And he never had a good season until his 5th year. And so he was Buffalo for 3 years. Then he went to New Mexico State. You know, good for him. He upped his star rating every time in the transfer portal. So you could say this is a player that is ascending. And then he had his best year, but it was in year 5. Now, this does come back, like, to the transfer portal, the money, all those things you talked about to start the show. They could potentially, like, reshift the landscape, right, of how we think about these players. And I think we'll really see it in probably the next 3 to 4 years. We'll have enough data to say this stuff is really mattering or not. So I think it's a reasonable question to ask, like, if he's actually really any good at football, because I do think his speed score and what he did at the combine is really pushing him up the board. And so draft capital is getting baked in. And that's obviously the big thing carrying him here, because, you know, he just ran so well at the NFL combine. But I do agree with you. Like, these players, you know, depending on where they played, the kind of offense they were in, like, we don't bet on them turning into receive. It's all, like, you have to prove it, but we're just, you know, Daigle and I are just kind of throwing out there, like, guys, like, none of this is a perfect science. Like, so to say that Mike Washington could never be a guy that might catch 35, 45 balls in the NFL, like, I think that would just be wrong. Like, it's somewhere in the range of outcomes. We're just saying it's low. It's probably, you know, the data would say it's probably not going to happen, but on the right team, like, there could be potential for it. So I will say it is final year, you know, and it was year 5, which the model doesn't give him much credit for, guys, because really all of the signal to future production in the NFL is mostly tied to their first 3 years. right? Like for receiver, in fact, it becomes negative in years 4 and 5. We'll see if that changes with the transfer portal and the NIL money moving forward. But with running backs, it's not quite as strong as what it is for receivers, but we still care most about the first 3 years. And it's just the late breakout is really what hurts his production rating. So he's getting carried by draft capital and his speed score.
To review the third tier of rookie running backs per Dwain McFarland, so it's definitive, is Mike Washington Jr. and Jadarian Price so far. Do you have other names that you're putting into this third tier?
Yeah, I think Katron Allen goes into this tier as well. So again, the tier here, guys, being like, these are backup running backs probably to start in the NFL, but they could turn into early down players. And maybe if you get lucky, the data is not telling us this, but if you get lucky, maybe you could do a little more as a receiver than what the model tells us.
And they're going to be second round rookie picks.
Yes. Yeah. These guys are all, they're for sure day 2, right? These are going to be day 2 guys. So yeah, Katron Allen would be the next one. And obviously like you guys know with Katron Allen, you come into Penn State and you have the number 1 recruit from the class, the number 1 running back recruit from the class in Nick Singleton. So that's impacting, the way that we look at Katron. But very similar to these other 2 guys, like showed that he can do work, on early downs. So I could see a team like the Lions, if he gets into like late day 2, being like, yeah, we got Isaiah Pacheco. We know Jahmyr Gibbs is our featured guy, but we want someone to complement him here and there. Like that would be somewhere like Katron Allen could land. And I would be like, oh, okay. Like I would give him a chance to overtake Isaiah Pacheco, right? Who likes punishing the ground as much as he likes punishing linebackers at the second level. So like, he's not a great prospect by any means, but he grades out slightly lower than Washington, slightly lower than what we talked about with Jadarian Price, but he's close enough. He's in the range of those guys in the rookie supermodel.
And that's the end of the third tier then, Katron Allen.
Yep. End of the third tier for me.
End of third tier.
Do you have any thoughts on Katron? Now, look, right now, he's projected to go pick 148. The 2 guys that Daigle talked about before with Price and Washington, 46 and 65. So, I mean, we're talking about Katron he could be a day 3 pick. And so the nice thing is the model actually sees him the same as the other 2 guys, basically same tier, even though he has drastically lower draft capital. But again, remember guys, the draft capital, as you move on, you start getting into the end of round 2 is really where we start get the flattening. So it doesn't matter quite as much for the running backs after the end of round 2.
Especially with this class. And yeah, I think Katron Allen's someone who could, like you said, replace an Isaiah Pacheco. So find 8 touchdowns in his rookie year, despite not being an actual like 100 carry guy, still playing a backup role, just because that's what he was.
I mean, look, his comps, they're not great, guys. It's Audric Estime, Kendre Miller, and Alexander Madison. But those are all guys that at one point
they're NFL players.
Yeah, they're NFL players. Kendre, like we really don't even know. Like the injuries have actually, robbed Kendre. He might actually be a good player. Yeah. I mean, Alexander Madison was never a great player, but like held starting jobs at points, in his NFL career. So like these guys, I know when you see them as comps, and I get a lot of people reach out to me and they're like, man, how can this guy be in a third tier with those comps? And I'm like, man, it's just, we're playing the percentages, and like, I get it. Those were not superstars, but this is the class we're dealing with the running backs. And, Madison did have years where he was a starter, in the NFL, and he didn't win you your fantasy league. And a lot of people overdrafted him. I can't remember how many years back that was now, Daigle, but it was the year with Minnesota.
Yep.
Like he definitely got overdrafted. It was one of those, hey, where do we project the volume? I guess it's Alexander Madison. Wrong. He wasn't good enough to take it all, but he's held an NFL starting job multiple times, in his career.
Anyone in a 14-team league also started Audric Estime a couple times at some point last year for the Saints. So we just keep circling back to these guys who are good enough to hang around in the NFL.
That's right.
And that's kind of all you have to do, especially at this level, is just hang around to get the touches eventually. Moving on to the next tier, though, I think this is where we're really going to be talking about third-round rookie picks and possibly even just passing on these selections based on how long your roster could be, because maybe you don't even want to stash some of these guys. But who stands out for you next?
Yeah, for me, like, so the next tier, the way I have it written up in the rookie supermodel, these are running back fives in fantasy. So
Yeah.
to frame this, as Daigle's saying, these would be a running back five on your roster potentially. But these are the guys that I think do have every down potential. And I think that Seth McGowan is one of them. Now, the big knock on Seth McGowan is he's old, guys. He's like, might be older than some of your granddads, like this guy, didn't, break out early in his college career or anything, but in 22 to 23, he had to play at Texas College. So he had legal issues. He had off-field stuff that basically got him kicked off of his team. And so the model doesn't know that. Like, basically there are 2 years there where he had to iron out, right, his legal issues and then come back to play football again. And he came back in 24 to New Mexico State. He only played in he only played actually how many years? He played the whole year there. He didn't get that many carries. But then he gets to Kentucky, right, in his final year, and he plays 54% of the snaps. Now, none of this stuff, Daigle, again, we're talking about RB5s. But theoretically, Seth McGowan does have every down upside. Like, he played passing downs. He has the size to handle carries inside the 5-yard line. So he has a lot of the things that we would look for if you're just saying, closing your eyes, throwing a dart and saying, there's 2 injuries on the team. Like, he's probably going to be a team's 3rd or 4th running back, might not make a roster ultimately, depending on where he ends up going. But if he goes in round 4 or 5, to a team with a weak running back too, I would have some interest, right, in a player like Seth McGowan. Now, the model's definitely punishing him for his age, but like I said, it doesn't know that those 2 years, right, he essentially missed due to legal issues. And so what I did is I was like, what if we gave him the production he had in his final 2 years in years 3 and 4 of his college career? And it would move him up significantly. It would move him closer to the tiers we talked before. Now, I don't do that, but it's just a hypothetical thing you work through whenever you're looking at all these players and you're digging into them. So if you look at his PFF rush receiving grade, it's in the 73rd percentile, and it's weighted, guys, 50%, to each side, rushing and receiving. Doesn't grade out as well from film. None of the film analysts are really on Seth McGowan. You'll find a little snippet here or there, from somebody. You got to cover all the bases when you're writing up all these players. So you never know how to take all of that from some of the analysts. But at the same time, his closest comps in the model, Tony Pollard came out as one of them. Now, Tony Pollard was obviously younger, but I included him because of what happened, with Seth McGowan with the legal issues. But the other 2, Keyshawn Vaughn, gross, not good. John Kelly, a guy that just kind of hangs around in the league, practice squad guy, that kind of player. So theoretically, right, there's the every down potential. Do you have any thoughts on him?
McGowan also tested quite well at the combine, especially for his age. I don't know why. I'm still confused for being I have him as a 96th percentile athlete. I don't know why he only had a long run of 20 yards last year. You would think he would be a more explosive player, but the fact he tested well still stands out to me, especially in this kind of tier.
Yeah. And I think that's the thing, especially in a class like this. You're just, I come back to if there's any potential that you could unlock 3 down potential, I'm just going to kind of pay attention to that profile. The other one that I would have, here.
Can I guess?
Yeah.
Jamari Taylor.
It is. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You mentioned all around duties potentially, and at least we've seen Taylor handle receiving job. Maybe not do it so well, but he was used to as a receiver.
Yeah. And another older prospect, he's going to be 24 and a half years old, guys, whenever he enters the league. That's old.
Yep.
But again, it's a shallow running back class. So we just kind of have to do our due diligence here. And if you look at him, he came out, in the rookie supermodel with a grade of 65. So we're below that 70 that we've talked about. I didn't mention McGowan's, but he was a 67. So they're right there together. But this is a guy that, he was a solid receiver out of the backfield. That's the biggest thing. His closest comps in the model, their names you'll recognize. Now, he's a bigger player than Tyler Beatty, or Tyler Bidet. It's just so weird. I always said Beatty, and now I realize it's Tyler Bidet, and it's just stuck. But Tyler Bidet, he was a guy that was a good receiver out of college, hangs around on a Sean Payton offense, of course. Who else would keep a guy like Tyler Bidet on their roster? It's Sean Payton, Evan Hull, and then Naheem Hines. When you look at Jamari Taylor, just really solid receiving profile and a good enough profile, on the ground to where, in a pinch, I could see a team like giving him, the workload depending on what's going on with their roster at the time. So the model doesn't think he's this great player, views him as a mid to late day 3 pick, but has just enough going for him, man, that it's like, look, in the right situation, you might get 4 or 5 games out of him where he's giving you 15 fantasy points per game, and then he goes back to being a backup.
First of all, Tyler Bidet, Adam Troutman, and little Jordan Humphrey always going to be following Sean Payton. They are guaranteed to be NFL lifers due to Sean Payton. And then, yes, for Jamari Taylor, at least like you said, we've seen even catching last year 43 of 54 targets. Like maybe not a reliable receiver, but shown at least that he can handle that kind of role.
20% career targets per route run, like, so solid enough. That's 52nd percentile. His best receiving yards per team pass attempt was in the 52nd percentile. Best target share season, 15%. That's 52nd percentile. So none of these are elite marks, but it's like, okay, like you can get out there and do your thing, if a team needs you to.
That kind of reminds me, and maybe he might be in this tier for you too, of Adam Randall. And that Adam Randall was a converted wide receiver. And because of that, then maybe teams don't view him as someone who can handle every down. Maybe they strictly want him as a pass catching back. But Randall got out there and he had 6 drops last year, which shows you why he had to convert from wide receiver to running back. But who else is in this tier for you, Randall included?
Yeah, so Randall's in there. Like you said, he was recruited as a wide receiver. 4 stars actually. So a pretty highly recruited wide receiver. That's what he played his first 3 years, and he didn't play running back until year 4. So it's another tricky one, for the model, because you don't have any of the rushing production, which the receiving production is mostly what it cares about. But to your point, Daigle, he was a terrible receiver. He was a terrible receiver. If we were grading Adam Randall as a receiver, as a prospect, like he would be near the bottom of the model all time. Especially for a guy that had his recruiting background, but ran fast at the combine. And he's 232 pounds. He's got a 113.2 speed score. That's in the 74th percentile. He's another guy that since the combine, like before the combine, the talk was probably not draftable, right? After the combine, potentially a day 3 pick is what we're talking about with Adam Randall. So as far as where he grades out in the model, a 64. So it's not that much lower than what we just talked about, like with Jamari Taylor sitting there at a 65. These guys all really get clustered together. Another guy that sits in, and these are all tier 5 guys for me. Randall is included in tier 5. So I just running back 6 dart throws. That's what these guys are. If we're setting realistic expectations, like 16% of these players in this range, Daigle, notch a top 36 running back finish in their first 3 seasons. So we're not talking about high hit rates here, guys.
No.
But it does happen. These things do happen. So Randall's in that tier. And then I'm lower than a lot of people, I think, actually, on Damon Claiborne. He fits in this tier for me as well. So, I mean, his closest comps in the model, Isaiah Pacheco and Tyler Goodson. So like one of these guys that, the model looks at him as a day 3 NFL draft pick. There's a chance like he could go higher in day 3 because there is a lot of like, I don't want to say a lot, but there's some decent buzz around him, in the film community. And I have seen quite a few like people that base all of their evaluation on film of him being higher, right, than where I have him here. So, maybe he's better than what the model thinks. But like the big thing is like, he just never had a huge season. He regressed in years 3 and 4. Wasn't good enough over the first 2 years to really grade out like in a big way. And the thing I've seen the most on him, I don't know about you, but like the film stuff is like people talking about him being an explosive playmaker. But the challenge is only 12% of his carries went for 10 plus yards in his college career. That's in the 29th percentile. So people may be seeing something on film that gets unlocked at the next level. But typically if you play as long as he did in college and like that's the best you can do, not great. Dropped 11% of his targets. That doesn't go into the model, but like it's worth noting. So, I mean, we're probably talking about like just an early downs player and like didn't really flash in that big of a way for me, but same tier as Adam Randall.
Not just that 11% drop rate, but also had 5 fumbles last year. So you're just talking about a guy who
might not make
coughs it up.
Coaches don't like that. Dude.
Yeah. And like you said, that's not something that has been sticky for draft capital, but we still, in tiebreakers, weigh it.
Yes.
And when you have 6 drops and 5 fumbles in one season, I don't know how you're going to stay on a field even if you get drafted. That's pretty crazy.
He was never featured as a receiver. on on teams that weren't loaded with like pass catchers. Like that bothers me a lot more than a player like a Jadarian Price who plays in a big program with a great program quality rating like Notre Dame. They're getting highly lauded recruits basically at all their skill positions, and like you can squint and be like, okay, like we're not going to project him to be a great receiver in the NFL, but like he could surprise us and catch more balls than we think. Like with Damon Claiborne, it's like, really, you should have shown more by now, in my opinion.
I only have the leftovers, like my taxi squad.
Just talk
guys.
about who you want to talk about.
The only other ones that stand out, honestly, for me are Robert Henry Jr., if only because he does seem to be getting some late buzz, despite getting benched last year in the second half of the season. So I don't know exactly where it's all coming from, but still 4.2 yards after contact per carry. Also not bad missed tackle production. So I think he could be a fine player, maybe that lands on day 3. And then when I brought JJ on for that first episode that everyone can go back to, he said Des Reed's out of Pittsburgh's high-end comp was Tariq Cohen as a receiving back. Again, very low hit rate, but now we're already talking about the potential day 3 guys and late round picks. So that's another one. And then the other one I'm sliding in here is that it's kind of like the poor man's version of Katron Allen, which how can you get poorer than that? But like maybe Robin Hemby, who's like, was actually a reliable ball carrier, zero explosiveness, but you could see him earning that early down or like roll inside the 5-yard line naturally for his size and how he performed at Indiana. Also just 2 fumbles on 710 career carries. So your thoughts on like the leftovers?
Yeah, we'll hit on all those. We'll start with Hemby since you just left there. Like he has a 71 production rating in the rookie supermodel. Was never good as
that's great. Yeah. I mean, that's great for a day 3 guy.
that's great for the other guys we've just been talking about. Now never did anything as a receiver. Really a 15%, career targets per route run. So like that's well below the 50th percentile. Doesn't make tacklers miss. This doesn't necessarily, the way that I handle the film rating and the model, it's using the PFF run grade as well as Lance Zierlein's grades from NFL.com. But if you look at him and you just want to break those things down, 27th percentile in missed tackles force, 20th percentile in explosive rush rate. And this is despite over the last 2 years playing on a pretty good offense. So also a late breakout, and he never had a huge season, but I'm with you. Like I could see him turning into, if he were to win a role in the NFL, it's going to be as an early down grinder on a weak depth chart or due to an injury. Desmond Reed, he really pops in the model, and the reason why is because of his pass catching chops. A 1.90 yards per route run, that's 68th percentile. His best receiving yards per team pass attempt comes in at the 68th percentile. So this guy's a legit player out of the backfield as a receiver. The problem is he's 174 pounds. So it's just hard to see a path. Like with the guys that are in that 185 to 190 range, we give them grace. Right. But once you get down into this range at 174, like the model on a sliding scale does start taking points away from you, just because it's so rare that a player at this size ultimately ever handles the kind of workload we need in fantasy to be viable. So my guess is Desmond Reed, though, is going to get drafted, and he will be like a 2-minute offense specialist, right? And the 2-minute offense guys, you're not staying in to block a linebacker. So his size is no longer a liability. It's just literally, we're going to go as fast as we can. And if the defense is playing shell coverage, and we want to check it down, we want a playmaker in the receiving game, Desmond Reed can do that. Now, he could surprise us and be more, but he would be a massive outlier at 174 pounds. With Robert Henry Jr., I think that's the other one you gave.
Yeah.
JUCO transfer. Then, he played his final 2 seasons at UTSA. 1.70 yards per team attempt. So guys, that's just taking receiving yards times 2 plus rushing yards. We're just normalizing it by the number of plays the team ran whenever he was available in those games. The problem with him is he gets docked in the model. The model also, adjusts for strength of schedule. His yards per team pass attempt was minus 0.38 over expected. with a 66 strength of schedule rating. So it's using his strength of schedule rating. Essentially, it looks at all the opponents he played, and then it comes up with, okay, was he over or under expected on his yards per team attempt?
And the 66 percentile isn't even like a good number. That's like, and
that's on a scale
he's playing barely above average competition.
Yeah. So it's actually lower than that in a percentile, because in the model for a 66 strength of schedule rating, it's on a scale of 50 to 100, right? So it's actually below the 50th percentile.
That's bad. Yeah.
And so his production rating really got dinged because he wasn't that great for playing against bad competition. I would give the one other name, and I think this player is going to play receiver at the NFL level, but I think it's Eli Heidenreich out of Navy. Mm-hmm. He does have enough size, that if someone wanted to try him more out at running back and give him more work, like theoretically you could. And how we know he's a receiver, guys, like I'm seeing a lot of people, like if you were to put him in the rookie supermodel at running back, his career receiving metrics would grade out in a range with Christian McCaffrey. But I just don't think it's fair to do that. And the reason why, he played slot back at Navy. And if you guys aren't familiar with slot back, it's essentially attached to the line of scrimmage, but you're really a slot wide receiver. That's the position you're playing in the offense. Now, he's Navy's all-time leading receiver. And if Bill Belichick were still coaching an NFL team, he would draft this dude because he loves the Naval Academy, obviously due to his dad. But when you look at him, man, 11 and a half yards average depth of target. Again, that's not a running back number, guys. 75% route participation rate over his career. Only handled 10% of the design rushing attempts. But again, like he does have the size and he is a prolific receiver. Like if some team did draft him and say they're making him their running back 3, I would move him probably all the way up ahead of Seth McGowan and those guys. And potentially, I think we would put him in the tier with probably just slot him in his own tier below Mike Washington Jr. and Katron Allen and those guys. Like if he did land on a team that says we're going to play this guy at running back, I think if I had to like put odds on it, my gut says like 70% chance he plays slot wide receiver in the NFL.
Damn. Before I let you out of here, curious on who you believe, and again, this will all be decided after the draft because we'll know their draft capital. But right now, who do you believe you're going to be most overweight on just in the running backs and rookie drafts this year? For example, I think Emmett Johnson is an end of first round rookie draft player without knowing his draft capital. Thus, I can already see I'm going to have the most of him just because he probably will be viewed as a second round player instead. So I'll be quote unquote reaching on him. But who is your player for that style of drafting?
Yeah, I think Emmett Johnson is a good name. I think it's really, I'll be spreading that out around Jonah Coleman, Emmett Johnson, and then Nick Singleton. Like Singleton will probably
your second tier, basically.
Yep. And just depending on where they shake out, like an ADP for rookie drafts will kind of determine like which one, I'm getting the most of. The player that's going the lowest of those threes in rookie draft will probably get the most weight, but I'll be placing bets on all of them. And I kind of hope that Jonah Coleman doesn't sneak up in drafts right now. Like he's slotted to go around pick 90. That would really keep him down, in rookie drafts. And so I think Jonah Coleman, if I had to pick one name, it will probably be Jonah Coleman. My guess is like with, because JJ really likes Emmett Johnson, my gut says that like he'll end up going higher. So if those two guys get drafted in the same range, but I would put my bet on Jonah Coleman.
With that being said, Dwayne, we talked about running backs today, but tell everyone where they can find the rest of your rookie rankings and the model at.
Yeah, you guys just head over to fantasylife.com. It's for free. It's on the homepage right now. If you scroll down just a little bit, there's a module there in the middle of the page, and you'll see it. Running back rookie supermodel, wide receiver rookie supermodel, tight end rookie supermodel. We also do have a tool where you can see all of the players in the rookie supermodel. You can either do it by draft class, or you're just like, hey, I just want to see where this class stacks up like since 2017 at running back. And all the players are in there. You have the rookie supermodel rating, all the other things I talked about, their production rating, their film rating, their program quality, their strength of schedule, all the key components that are drivers within the model. You can see all those things. And, where there's close tiebreakers and you want to lean particularly more into one factor or another, maybe it's the production rating, you can easily do that. So find it all over at fantasylife.com.
Fantasylife.com, of course, with our other friends, Matthew Berry, Ian Harditz, Peter Overzet, and the rest of the crew there. So Thanks to Dwayne for joining. We will be back next week with another episode on rookies, just a few weeks away now from the actual NFL draft. So hang in there. We're nearly there. Until then, be a little bit kinder than what's required. I'll see you next time.